squatting Slav TV.
Cucks Canada has gone into full-on liberal loony overdrive this month after everyone's favorite soy boy Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeted that he would be issuing a formal national apology to Canada's LGBT community. On November 28, 2017, Trudeau is set to hold a public apology to all LGBT people who have been fired from their government jobs, mistreated, or criminally prosecuted. According to Trudeau, this apology will send Canadians on a path to equality and inclusion while acknowledging the persecution and injustices suffered by sexual minorities. Lawyers and advocates of various Canadian minority sexual rights groups also claim that a financial settlement will accompany this apology, primarily targeting those who were pressured to leave the Canadian military for being gay. Up until 1969, homosexual acts were a crime in Canada, and now the government aims to expunge the records of all of those convicted of such crimes. Douglas Elliott, the lawyer who led a class action lawsuit on behalf of those who lost their jobs, advised that he didn't know how many people would be eligible for compensation, but believes that thousands of people were affected by this and will probably qualify. How the Liberal government plans to determine who qualifies for this compensation remains to be seen, but it's not surprising that the Trudeau government is once again willing to shell out taxpayers' money for the sake of virtue signaling and maintaining their moral high ground. Just last month, the Liberal government awarded $31 million to 3 Canadian citizens who were tortured in Syria after being suspected of terrorism. Earlier this year, they also awarded $10 million to convicted terrorist Omar Khadr, and now they're going to dish out money to thousands of LGBT Canadians who still act as if they're a threatened and oppressed minority in 2017. In reality, being gay in Canada is as mainstream and acceptable as it gets. Canadian businesses promote equality and the inclusion of sexual minorities, big banks embrace the LGBT community, and pride parades held nationwide attract more people than any other festivities in the country. The Prime Minister himself even foolishly boasts about his annual participation in the Pride Parade, all the while being political bedmates with the very countries that produce the same terrorists that execute gay people by throwing them off buildings. At the end of the day, Justin Trudeau doesn't really care about the rights of the LGBT community, because if he did, he wouldn't be trying to save the lives of thousands of returning ISIS fighters who would gladly execute any gay person on sight. While we're on this topic, in the last few weeks, the Trudeau government has been embroiled in a debate over its treatment of returning ISIS soldiers in Canada, and Trudeau has made it very clear that he has no real intention of punishing these terrorists. In fact, Trudeau's plan is to reintegrate ISIS terrorists into Canadian society because people who go down to Syria to cut heads off deserve a second chance in Cucks Canada.
Mr. Speaker, these are people who got on a plane to fight for ISIS and watched as our allied soldiers were burned to death in a cage. These are people who got on a plane to go fight for an organization that sells women and girls into slavery. These are people who left Canada to go and fight for a group of people who push homosexuals off of buildings just for being gay. So can the Prime Minister explain to the House exactly what kind of a program, a reintegration service, would look like for the people who commit these kinds of atrocities?
In October of 2017, Canada's Defence Minister comforted Canadians by assuring them that they're safe from returning ISIS terrorists. But 1 month later in November, Canada is officially concerned about these same ISIS terrorists. So, if you didn't like paying for the lawsuits of Canadian terrorists before, at least now you'll have an opportunity to dish out some dollars to support federal reintegration programs aimed at reintroducing terrorists into Canadian society. While countries such as the Netherlands are taking an active approach in stripping away returning ISIS fighters of their dual citizenships, Canada has made absolutely no effort in taking legal action against the 200 terrorists who have returned to the country thus far. The Canadian government seems to be more focused on changing the terrorist minds and providing resources to reintegrate terrorist families than it is to putting them behind bars or deporting them.
We recognize the return of even one individual may have serious national security implications, but we have launched the Canada Centre for Community Engagement and Prevention of Violence, which helps ensure resources are in place to facilitate disengagement from violent ideologies.
Keep in mind that all of this comes just 1 month after an ISIS Religion of Peace truck plowed through the streets of Edmonton, and at a time when ISIS terrorists are threatening Canadians and telling them that they're no longer safe in their own bedrooms. Overall, the end of 2017 has really been a crazy year for Canada, and the Liberal government's track record of sheer lunacy doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. Whether it's spending money on LGBT victimhood culture, or treating ISIS terrorists as victims who need to be reintegrated into Canadian society, Canada seems to be doing everything backwards. Whether or not the Liberal crazy train crashes anytime soon is a question that remains to be answered, but until then, it will definitely be interesting to see just how far down the spiral of insanity it continues to travel.